Pack your things and get out, you fat pig." My son said those words to his wife on the exact day he inherited $40 million. I stood there helpless, watching him destroy the woman who'd loved him for 7 years because she wasn't good enough for the life he thought he deserved. I'd just buried my wife a year ago, and now I was losing my son to greed. He thought I was just a grieving old man who'd stay silent, but my late wife had seen this coming. She'd hidden a clause in her will, one he never knew existed. And when I finally revealed it in court, his face went white. Too late for regret now. Hello everyone, welcome to our story. Before we begin, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're tuning in from. We love hearing from you. A quick note, this story weaves together fictional elements for entertainment and educational value. Any similarities to actual names or places are purely coincidental, but the lessons here are worth your time. 12 months after we buried Margaret, I found myself driving through downtown on a Tuesday morning that felt too bright. The sun glinted off glass towers like nothing had changed, like the world hadn't lost the best woman I'd ever known. My mind kept circling back to those final weeks in the hospice room. Margaret had looked at me with those sharp eyes that cancer couldn't dull and said something that stuck like a splinter. I made sure everyone gets what they deserve. At the time, I thought she meant the will, the money, simple things you leave behind. I had no idea how wrong I was. My left hand rested on the steering wheel, and the gold band on my ring finger caught the light. 38 years I'd worn that ring. 38 years of mortgage payments and Sunday dinners, and the kind of ordinary, beautiful life that feels invisible until it's gone. Margaret and I had built something real. We'd raised a son, created a home, and kept our promises. That ring meant something. Loyalty, partnership, the quiet kind of love that shows up every single day. I wondered if David still understood what his own wedding band was supposed to mean. The law offices of Crawford and Associates sat on the 14th floor of a building that tried too hard to look important. Margaret had been gone a year, and we were finally here to settle the estate. The reception area smelled like furniture polish and old money. Mahogany paneling, leather chairs, framed certificates announcing expensive expertise. Sarah arrived first, right on time, like she always was. She wore a floral dress, modest and pretty, exactly what a second-grade teacher would wear. Her dark hair was pulled back, and she'd put on makeup with care, like this day mattered. Like maybe today would mark some kind of turning point. We sat together making small talk. Sarah kept glancing at the elevator, waiting. "The money will help," she said softly. "David and I have been talking about maybe finally buying a house, starting a family. I think this could be a fresh start for us." I wanted to believe her. David showed up 20 minutes late, blowing through the elevator doors like he was doing everyone a favor. He wore an expensive suit, his dark hair styled with careful messiness. He had Margaret's eyes and my jawline, and for 35 years I'd looked at him and felt nothing but pride. Lately that pride had started to feel complicated. He pecked Sarah on the cheek without really looking at her and shook my hand. Professional. Distant. His other hand held his phone thumb, already scrolling. Sorry I'm late, conference call ran over." Sarah's smile flickered but held. "It's fine. We just got here." That was a lie. We'd been waiting 23 minutes. David sat beside his wife, but immediately angled toward his phone screen. Sarah reached over and put her hand on his knee, a small gesture asking for connection. David glanced up, gave her a quick smile that didn't reach his eyes, and went back to his phone. I watched this and felt something cold settle in my chest. Crawford's office was more mahogany, more leather, more certificates. James Crawford sat behind a desk, the size of a small car. A lean man in his mid-50s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He pulled out a leather folder embossed with Margaret's name. "Margaret was a remarkable woman," he began. Sharp, thoughtful, and very clear about her intentions. He read through the preliminaries. Jewelry to Sarah, books to the library, gardening tools to the neighbor. Each item had a story attached. Then Crawford reached the money. To my beloved husband, Robert Mitchell, I leave the sum of $40 million and our family home in gratitude for 38 years of unwavering partnership, devotion, and love. $40 million. I'd known Margaret had money, but that number didn't feel real. To my son, David Mitchell, and his wife, Sarah Bennett, Mitchell, I leave the sum of $40 million to be held in a joint trust, requiring both signatures for withdrawal or major financial decisions. May this gift support the life you build together and remind you daily of what matters most. David's face lit up. He sat forward, forgetting his phone. Sarah gasped, tears spilling over. 40 million. David breathed, and I heard something in his voice I didn't like. Not gratitude. Something that sounded too much like triumph. Sarah turned to him, eyes shining. We can start over. We can do everything we dreamed about. David nodded, but his hand had already drifted back to his phone, fingers moving under the table. I saw him typing, saw the small smile when he hit send. Crawford explained the trust structure, the tax implications, the timeline. Sarah asked questions, her voice trembling with hope. David made sounds of agreement, while his attention stayed fixed on his phone. Then Crawford did something that changed everything. He pulled out a cream-colored envelope with my name written across the front in Margaret's handwriting. A sealed letter for Robert Mitchell to be opened privately at your discretion. Margaret's instructions were clear. This is for you alone. I took it, and the weight felt wrong. Too heavy. My fingers traced Margaret's handwriting, and I could almost hear her voice. And everyone gets what they deserve. David barely glanced at the envelope, his focus back on his phone. Sarah was wiping her eyes. Crawford organized papers, moving toward closure. None of them saw what I saw, that this envelope wasn't an afterthought. It was deliberate, separate, secret. Margaret had left me a message she didn't want anyone else to see. We stood to leave. David was already at the door, phone pressed to his ear. Yeah, it's official. The inheritance cleared. 40 million. Tonight, let me see what I can do. Sarah stood beside me, watching her husband walk away without looking back. He's just excited, she said, trying to convince herself. David's Lexus pulled up beside us. Sarah, I'll meet you at home later. Got a business thing. Client meeting. He glanced at me. Dad, that envelope, probably just sentimental stuff. You'll read it at home, right? No rush. Something in the way he said it made the hair on my neck stand up. Like he needed me to be alone when I discovered whatever Margaret had written. I'll read it when I'm ready, I said. I stood alone in that parking garage and pulled out the envelope. Through the exit ramp, I could see David's Lexus paused at the light. Even from this distance, I could see him reach for his phone. The second Sarah's car turned the opposite direction, could see him smile. The same smile he used to give Sarah when they were young and in love. He wasn't smiling at his wife anymore. He was smiling at someone else. And somehow I knew Margaret had seen it too. That's when I understood this envelope wasn't about sentiment. It was about warning. David insisted on celebrating at Riverside Grill, the kind of steakhouse where prices weren't printed on the menu. He'd made reservations before we even left Crawford's office, which told me everything about how confident he'd been that the money was coming. The hostess led us to a corner booth with a view of the harbor. Before we'd even opened our menus, David ordered expensive champagne, not the house kind, but the one that came in an ice bucket with a cloth napkin wrapped around the neck. We're celebrating, David announced to the waiter. Big family news. Sarah folded her hands in her lap. That small, nervous gesture I'd seen 100 times. She was trying to match David's energy, but something about her posture looked braced, like she was preparing for impact. David raised his glass. To new beginnings. To finally having the resources to live the life we deserve. We drank while I thought about Margaret's envelope still sitting in my jacket pocket, heavy as a stone. David ordered for the table without asking what anyone wanted. Appetizers, entrees, sides, another bottle of champagne. He was spending money he didn't technically have yet. Sarah tried steering the conversation toward practical things. Their apartment lease was ending in 3 months. Maybe they could buy a small house, something with a yard. We're thinking too small, David said, cutting into his ribeye. This isn't about some starter home in the suburbs. This is seed money, investment capital. We leverage this, right? We could triple it in 5 years. We could also just be comfortable, Sarah said quietly. Pay off debt. Save for the future. David set down his knife and fork. Sarah, you're thinking like a teacher. This is business. This is opportunity. With $40 million, I can finally move in the circles I've been locked out of. The Hartleys, the development firms, the commercial projects that actually matter. I thought we mattered, Sarah said so soft I almost missed it. David didn't hear her. His phone buzzed, screen lighting up. He glanced at it, and something shifted in his expression. Excitement. Anticipation. Sorry, I need to take this. Client. He was already standing, walking toward the entrance. Hey, yeah, I know. It's official. 40 million. Can you believe it? Sarah stared at her plate, pushing risotto around without eating. He's just processing a lot, she said finally. The money, the possibilities. It's overwhelming. David returned 10 minutes later, energized and distracted. That was Hartley Development. They've got a major project in the works, luxury condos on the waterfront. They want me to consult. This inheritance means I can finally afford to play in that league. Shh, that's wonderful, Sarah said. When do they need you? Tonight, actually. Dinner meeting with Peter Hartley and his team. David was already signaling for the check. Sorry, babe, I know we were going to celebrate together, but this is the kind of opportunity you don't say no to. Sarah's face did something complicated. Disappointment and resignation and exhausted acceptance. I understand, she said, but her voice said something else entirely. David interrupted before she finished talking about her students. Maybe you can finally quit that job. Sarah stopped mid-sentence. What? The teaching thing. Now that we have the money, you don't have to work anymore. Just seems like you'd have better options than wiping noses and grading spelling tests. I love teaching, Sarah said, steel in her voice. Those kids need me. That work matters. Sure. I'm just saying you have choices now. But I want to. David shrugged, already checking his phone again. Whatever makes you happy. We walked out to the parking lot. David walked ahead, phone pressed to his ear. Sarah and I followed the gap, growing with every step. Sarah, I'll meet you at home. Probably late, though. This Hartley thing could run past midnight. We could celebrate tomorrow. Sarah offered hope, painful to hear. Just the two of us. Yeah, maybe. Let me see how tonight goes. He climbed into his car, then rolled down the window. Oh, Dad, one more thing. Don't mention that phone call at lunch to Sarah. Okay? I don't want her worrying about work stuff. He was asking his father to lie to his wife. No, of course, I said, and watched him drive away. Sarah drove away too, and I stood alone in that parking lot watching two separate cars head in two separate directions. At home, I sat in Margaret's study and opened the envelope. Inside were 2 documents, a handwritten letter and a legal form. I started with the letter, and Margaret's voice filled my head. Robert, my love, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and David has his inheritance. I prayed I was wrong about what I saw, but mothers know their children in ways that bypass hope. This past year, I watched our son change. Late nights distance from Sarah phone calls he thought I didn't notice. I saw him with a woman at Riverside Grill last September. A Hartley, I learned later. Young, beautiful, ambitious. I've added a clause to David's inheritance. If he commits infidelity or abandons Sarah without just cause within 5 years of receiving the money, his entire $40 million transfers immediately to her. No appeals, no negotiations. Robert, I need you to be my witness. Watch David. Document what he does. And when the time comes, be the man I've loved, for 38 years. Always yours, Margaret. My hands shook. I picked up the legal document and found the clause written in Crawford's precise language buried in Section 7, subsection 3. 5 years. A timer I hadn't known was counting. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "Hey, Dad, do me a favor and don't mention that call at lunch to Sarah. Don't want her worrying about nothing," I typed back. "Of course." Then I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Named it Evidence June 2024. I typed the date, the time, the location. Lunch at Riverside Grill. Multiple phone calls. David lied to Sarah about work. Requested father's cooperation in deception. My phone buzzed again. Also, if Sarah asks about tonight, it's a client dinner with the Hartley team. Just for your information, so our stories match. I added it to the evidence file. David had 5 years to prove he was worth the inheritance. Based on today, I didn't think he'd make it 5 weeks. Margaret's words kept me awake that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, while my mind replayed every detail from the restaurant, that final text from David asking me to cover his lies. By the time the sun came up, I'd made my decision. I needed to understand exactly what Margaret had set in motion and what my role was supposed to be. I called James Crawford's office the moment they opened and asked for an emergency consultation. "Robert, what's wrong?" Crawford's voice carried genuine concern. "I need to talk about Margaret's clause today." "Give me an hour. I'll clear my schedule." Crawford's office felt different this time. He pulled up a chair next to mine. "Colleagues, not attorney and client." "You read Margaret's letter," he said. Not a question. 3 times. Then I stayed up all night thinking about it. Crawford pulled out a file with Margaret's handwriting on colored tabs marking different sections. She'd been thorough. "The clause is airtight," Crawford began. "If David commits adultery or abandons Sarah without documented just cause before June 10th, 2029, the trustee transfers his $40 million to Sarah immediately. No probate process, no appeals. The money moves, and it's done. What counts as just cause? Documented abuse, substance addiction, requiring intervention, mental incapacity, felony conviction, abandonment by Sarah. Essentially, if Sarah gives him legitimate reason to leave, the clause doesn't trigger. But if he leaves her or betrays her, it activates. "He doesn't know," I said. "David doesn't know about the clause." Per Margaret's explicit instructions, the clause remains sealed unless 2 things happen. Option 1, 5 years pass without violation, at which point it expires, and David never needs to know. Option 2, it's triggered, at which point it becomes part of the public court record. So if I see him cheating, you document everything. Dates, times, locations, witnesses, photographs if possible. If Sarah files a claim to enforce the clause, we'll need enough evidence to convince a judge that the violation occurred. "But I can't tell her about the money," I said slowly. "If I tell Sarah about the $40 million, it could look like I'm influencing her decision to leave him." "Exactly. Sarah has to make her own choices. The clause exists to protect her if she makes the right choice, not to bribe her into making it." That evening, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to Harborside Lounge, a cocktail bar in the renovated warehouse district. I parked across the street with a clear view through the floor-to-ceiling windows. 7:43 on a Tuesday night. And there they were. Corner booth, candlelight, champagne bucket. David wore the suit from the will reading. The woman across from him was striking blonde hair, sharp features, expensive dress. She laughed at something David said, reaching across the table to touch his arm. Not a casual touch. The kind of touch that meant they'd touched before, often in ways that went beyond cocktails. Then David leaned forward and kissed her. No hesitation, no checking to see if anyone was watching. I took 3 photos. Hands shaking so badly the first one came out blurred, but the second and third were clear enough. I saved the photos to the cloud, backed them up twice, and added them to the evidence folder with timestamps and location data. Then I texted Sarah because I needed to hear she was okay, even though I knew she wasn't. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" Her response came back within seconds. "I'm okay, Dad. David's working late again. I made his favorite chicken piccata for dinner, but I guess it'll keep until tomorrow." Through the bar window, I watched David pour more champagne, watched the blonde woman slide closer in the booth, watched my son become someone I didn't recognize. The next morning, Sarah called asking if I could help them move a dresser. David was supposed to help, but had another meeting. Their apartment was small, but comfortable. Sarah had made it warm with plants and photographs and curtains she'd sewn herself. She talked about maybe using some of the inheritance money for adoption. David's always wanted kids, she said, eyes bright with hope. "I think once we're more settled, we could really start our family." I wanted to tell her that David hadn't mentioned kids once yesterday, that her dream of building a family with him was based on a version of David that maybe didn't exist anymore. "That sounds wonderful," I said instead, and hated myself for the lie. David showed up an hour later, annoyed we'd started without him. He barely looked at the pastries Sarah had bought, barely acknowledged the coffee she'd made. "Can we do this another time?" he asked, not looking up from his phone. "I've got calls to make." "I already set everything up," Sarah said softly. "It'll just take 20 minutes. He sighed theatrically and finally pocketed his phone. We moved the dresser into their bedroom. He complained the whole time about his schedule, his meetings, all the important things he had to do that didn't involve helping his wife. When we finished, David checked his watch. "I really need to head out. Client meeting in 40 minutes. Your mother loved you both very much." I said the words coming out before I could stop them. "She wanted you to be happy. Both of you happy." "We are happy," David said, too quick, too defensive. "Right, Sarah." He didn't wait for her answer. Just grabbed his keys and headed for the door. "I've got a call. Let yourself out." Sarah sat back down at the kitchen table, staring at her coffee. "You deserve better than cold dinners and broken promises," I said finally. She pulled her hands into her lap, defensive. "He's just adjusting. The money, the opportunities. It's overwhelming for him. If you ever need anything," I said, "you call me, day or night. You understand." She nodded, eyes bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. My phone buzzed before I'd even reached my truck. Text from David. "Hey Dad, don't mention the Hartley stuff to Sarah. Okay? She gets weird about Vanessa, thinks there's something there. Women, right?" My son had just admitted there was someone named Vanessa. Had casually asked his father to help hide an affair. I typed back, "Your secret's safe." Then I opened the evidence folder and added a new entry. 5 years until the clause expired. 60 months. I didn't think my son would make it 60. The text came through on a Wednesday afternoon while I was replacing the bathroom faucet. "David wants you to come to dinner tonight. He says he has exciting news to share." Sarah's words, not David's. That detail stuck with me. If the news was so exciting, why hadn't my son called me himself? I texted back that I'd be there at 7, then spent the rest of the afternoon with a knot in my stomach. By 6:45, I was standing in the flower section of the grocery store, picking out sunflowers for Sarah, because she deserved something cheerful. Their apartment smelled like pot roast and garlic comfort food that took hours to make properly. The small dining table was set with their wedding china candles flickering in glass holders. Sarah had created something special here, a celebration dinner. "Where's David?" I asked. "We're running late. Work thing." She checked her phone for the 3rd time since I'd arrived. "He texted 20 minutes ago. Should be here any minute." 7:30 came and went. The candles burned lower. Sarah reheated the gravy twice, stirring it with mechanical precision, while her smile grew tighter. 8:15. The key finally turned in the lock. David walked in, still wearing his Bluetooth earpiece, finishing a conversation with someone who wasn't us. He didn't acknowledge the set table, the candles, the effort Sarah had poured into this dinner. Just headed straight for the whiskey cabinet. He took a long drink, loosened his tie, and finally addressed the room. I'll make this quick. No hello. No apology for being over an hour late. Sarah stood from the couch, smoothing her dress. Should I serve dinner now, or... Sit down, Sarah. The tone made something cold slide down my spine. Not angry, not emotional. Just flat and final. Sarah sat. I stayed standing, every instinct screaming that I needed to be ready for whatever was about to happen. David took another sip of whiskey, then turned back to face us with an expression I'd never seen before. Detached. Distant. I've made some decisions about our future, he said. The Hartley project is moving forward. I'm partnering directly with Peter Hartley's development firm. Major opportunity. Sarah's face tried on a smile that didn't fit right. That's wonderful, honey. I can finally operate at the level I should be at, which means some changes need to happen. I've put a deposit down on a condo in Hartley Tower. 2-bedroom, 30th floor harbor view. Move-in is next week. Sarah's attempted smile began to crack. We're moving, but I love this neighborhood and my school is right down the street. I'm moving, Sarah. 2 words that landed like a demolition ball. I don't understand, she whispered. David set his glass down without using a coaster. I'm asking for a divorce. You can stay here for now, but I'll need you out by the end of the month. The lease is in my name. Clinical, transactional, like he was terminating a gym membership instead of a 7-year marriage. The color drained from Sarah's face. David, what are you? We just got your mother's inheritance. We were supposed to... That money is exactly why I can finally do this. I've been unhappy for years, Sarah. You know it. I know it. Let's not pretend anymore. I started moving toward him. David held up one hand. Dad, stay out of this. Sarah's voice came out broken, desperate. Is there someone else? That's not the point. Is there someone else? David exhaled, annoyed. Vanessa and I have been seeing each other. Yes, she understands my ambitions. She gets what I'm trying to build. She fits the life I'm building now. Sarah made a sound like all the air had been punched out of her lungs. How long? Her voice was barely audible. Does it matter? How long, David? 9 months. 9 months. While Margaret was dying. While they sat in hospital waiting rooms holding hands. While Sarah stood beside him at the funeral, steadying him when he cried. My voice came out low and dangerous. David, think very carefully about what you're doing. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years. He gestured at Sarah with his whiskey glass, casual and cruel. Look at her dad. She's let herself go. She's boring. She teaches finger painting to kindergartners and thinks that's a career. I'm about to close deals worth millions. Sarah stood, her whole body shaking. You told me you loved me. 2 weeks ago you said... I said what I needed to say until the inheritance cleared. Now it has. And I'm done. I stepped between them. That's enough. No, Dad. Sarah's voice had changed, gone cold and steady. Let him finish. Let him show me exactly who he is. David pulled out his phone, typed something, hit send. Vanessa's on her way up. I'd prefer you be gone before she gets here. Pack what you need tonight. The rest we'll figure out through lawyers. A car horn sounded from the street below. That's her. Sarah walked to the mantel where their wedding photo sat in a silver frame. She picked it up, stared at it for a long moment, then set it down facing the wall. I loved you, she whispered. Through everything. I loved you. David adjusted his Rolex. I know. That was the problem. You loved me more than you loved yourself. The doorbell rang. I helped Sarah pack a suitcase while my hands shook with rage. Downstairs, I could hear Vanessa's laughter, bright and careless. David's voice responding, relaxed in a way I hadn't heard in months. In my truck, Sarah sat silent in the passenger seat while I drove away from the building she'd called home for 3 years. She didn't cry. Her face had gone blank, shock settling in. At a red light, I pulled out my phone, and opened the evidence folder. June 15th, 2024, 8:47 p.m. David Mitchell admitted to 9-month extramarital affair. Forcibly removed wife from shared residence. Mistress arrived same evening. Witness Robert Mitchell. I sent a text to James Crawford. We need to talk. Tomorrow morning. It's time. My phone buzzed immediately. David. Thanks for helping Dad. Knew you'd understand. This is what's best for everyone. I stared at that message at my son's complete inability to see what he'd just done, and felt something fundamental break in my chest. I deleted the text without responding. Sarah stared out the window, face reflected in the glass. I don't know what happens now, she said, finally, voice hollow. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Now we fight back. The Comfort Inn off Highway 9 had a neon sign that flickered between vacancy and no, like it couldn't make up its mind. I pulled into the parking lot at 1:30 in the morning. The building squat and anonymous, exactly what we needed. Sarah hadn't spoken since we left the apartment. The night clerk barely looked up when I paid cash for 2 weeks. Room 237, second floor, overlooking the parking lot. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing that blue dress Margaret had bought her, her packed suitcase untouched by the door. She looked small in the cheap fluorescent light diminished. I don't understand, she whispered. We were going to use that money for adoption, for a future. I sat beside her, careful not to crowd her space. He's not the man you married. When did he change, or was I just too stupid to see it? You weren't stupid. You were loyal. There's a difference. Sarah stared at her hands, twisting the wedding ring she hadn't taken off yet. He said I'd let myself go, that I was boring. Maybe he's right. Stop. My voice came out harder than I intended. You're a woman who kept loving someone who stopped deserving it. That's not weakness, Sarah. That's strength he'll never understand. That's when she finally cried. Real tears, the kind that had been building since David walked through that door and destroyed everything. I held her while she shook, feeling completely helpless and furiously angry all at once. At 3 in the morning, when her breathing had finally evened into exhausted sleep, I stepped outside and called Crawford. It happened, I said without preamble. I need to know our next steps. By 10 o'clock that same morning, I was back in Crawford's office. He'd cleared his schedule. He spread my documentation across his desk, like evidence at a crime scene. Photos from the bar, David's texts, timestamps the video I'd taken of Vanessa arriving while Sarah packed. This is solid, Crawford said, nodding slowly. Clear proof of infidelity. The abandonment is documented. If Sarah files to enforce the clause, we have enough to convince any judge. When do we tell her about the money? Not yet. Crawford's tone was firm. Sarah has to file for divorce because she wants to end the marriage, not because $40 million is waiting for her. If she knows about the inheritance before she makes that choice, David's lawyers will argue undue influence. And if she doesn't file, then we wait. But Robert, from what you've described, she will. This kind of betrayal doesn't heal. Crawford pulled a business card from his desk drawer. Give her this. Marcus Webb Family Law. Tell her he's offering services for a friend of the family. He knows about the clause and won't mention it until the time is right. I pocketed the card. What about David? He'll fight this. Good. Let him fight. Every move he makes will prove Margaret's clause was justified. That afternoon, I drove past Hartley Tower. Couldn't help myself. Needed to see what David had traded his marriage for. The building dominated the waterfront, all glass and steel and expensive views. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows on the 30th floor, I could make out movement. David and Vanessa champagne glasses catching afternoon light, gesturing at their new space like they were planning how to fill it. David's life had upgraded overnight. I drove back to the Comfort Inn, where Sarah answered the door in jeans and an old college t-shirt, eyes red but clear. She'd showered, pulled her hair back, started the slow process of putting herself back together. "Joe, I called a lawyer," she said before I'd even sat down. "Marcus Webb. He said you referred him." I nodded. "He said I have a strong case. David's affair, the abandonment, the timeline." She paused, studying my face. "He also said something strange, that I should document every expense, every asset, every communication, like he's expecting some major discovery." My pulse quickened. Crawford was preparing her without revealing the clause yet. "I'm going back to work Monday." Sarah continued her jaw setting with determination I recognized from Margaret. "I'm not going to fall apart. David thinks I'm weak. I'm going to prove him wrong." That evening I found myself at Margaret's grave as the sun dropped toward the horizon. The granite headstone was still new enough to gleam her name, and dates carved with precision that felt too clinical for everything she'd been. I knelt in the grass, tracing her name with my finger. "I'm keeping my promise," I whispered. "But this is going to hurt him. Our son. I'm going to help take away everything he thinks matters." The wind moved through the cemetery trees. "You were right. He did this to himself." My voice caught. "But he's still our boy. And I don't know if what I'm about to do is justice or revenge." I sat there until the shadows grew long, talking to her like she could hear. My phone buzzed, startling me. Text from David. "Hey Dad, sorry about the drama last week. Sarah's taking it hard. Can you check on her, make sure she's okay? I still care about her, just not in that way anymore." I stared at that message, reading it 3 times. My son wanted me to comfort the woman he'd destroyed while he celebrated with his mistress. Wanted me to make sure she was handling her devastation well. I typed back carefully. "I'm taking care of Sarah. Don't worry about her." Then I added one more line. "Your mother would be proud of how you're handling everything." I hit send, knowing he'd read it as approval when it was actually condemnation. I opened the evidence folder and added a new entry. June 18th. David requested I provide emotional support to Sarah while he cohabits with a fair partner. Demonstrates awareness of harm caused, plus lack of remorse. Asked me to verify she's okay, while enjoying new luxury condo with Vanessa Hartley. I saved it, backed it up to 3 separate locations, then stood at Margaret's grave one final time. "Let the games begin," I whispered to her headstone. Somewhere across town, Sarah was probably planning her first day back at work, preparing to face second graders who would ask where Mr. David was. Somewhere in Hartley Tower, David was probably pouring more champagne, showing Vanessa the view, congratulating himself on finally having the life he deserved. And here in this cemetery, I was preparing to honor my wife's final wishes by destroying our son's carefully constructed future. Margaret had seen this coming a year ago, had planned for it, prepared for it, trusted me to execute it when the time came. The time had come. 10 days after I stood at Margaret's grave and declared war on my son's lies, I found my truck keys sitting on the kitchen counter instead of hanging on the hook by the door where I'd left them. Small thing. Easy to dismiss. I grabbed them and headed out for groceries, thinking nothing of it until later that night when my reading glasses turned up in the refrigerator next to the milk. I laughed it off. 62 wasn't 90. People misplaced things. Then David started calling every day. "Just checking in, Dad. How are you feeling? Any confusion, forgetting things?" "I'm fine. A little forgetful maybe, but that's normal. It's just Mom's death was hard on you. Sometimes grief affects memory. If you need anything, I'm here." The calls felt caring at first. My son reaching out, making sure I was okay. I appreciated the attention after feeling invisible during his whirlwind with Vanessa. July 2nd changed everything. I woke at 2 in the morning to use the bathroom and found my front door standing wide open. I knew I'd locked it. Had checked it twice like I did every night since Margaret died. I called David immediately. He arrived within 20 minutes, hair messed from sleep, genuine concern on his face. Dad, did you forget to lock it? No, I locked it. I checked twice. His expression shifted to something that looked like pity. Okay, let's just make sure everything's secure. He walked through the house, checking windows while I followed, watching him test locks and peer into closets. When I stepped into the living room to check the back door, I didn't see him move my coffee maker from its usual spot to the opposite counter. The next morning, I reached for it automatically. My hand found empty space. I turned confused and spotted it across the kitchen. My phone rang. David. Morning sleep, okay. Door stayed locked. Yeah, but did you move my coffee maker when you were here? Long pause. No, Dad. I didn't touch your coffee maker. Are you feeling all right? That afternoon, he called again, suggesting I schedule a checkup. Just routine, he said. Stress after losing mom, grief doing strange things to the mind. Dr. Jennifer Palmer came highly recommended. I agreed to the appointment mostly to stop his worried calls. Palmer's office was all chrome and leather certificates covering the walls. David showed up 5 minutes after I arrived, apologetic about being in the neighborhood, insisting he wanted to support me. During the examination, he kept interjecting. Dad's been forgetting things. Keys locking doors. Last week, he called me at 2 a.m., convinced someone broke in, but the door was just unlocked. He'd locked it, but didn't remember. Wait, that's not what happened. The door was locked. Dr. Palmer's voice stayed gentle. Robert, disorientation after losing a spouse is completely normal. He's also been emotional, David continued, calling me about mom, forgetting we'd already had those conversations. My frustration built. David, you're twisting things. Dad, I'm worried. That's all. His hand landed on my shoulder, his voice catching slightly. I can't lose you too. Palmer ran cognitive tests. I passed easily. No signs of dementia. Some stress markers expected given your circumstances. But the memory lapses. David pressed. Monitor it. Keep a journal. If it continues, we'll do deeper testing. In the parking lot, David hugged me tight. I'm sorry. I'm just scared. You're all I have left. Guilt washed over me for being annoyed. My son was grieving too. 3 days later, Linda Foster knocked on my door with a casserole. She saw David here late last night, around 11. Didn't know you had company. I frowned. David wasn't here last night. Her face clouded. Robert, I saw his car. Silver Lexus, right? I checked my phone. No texts from David. Maybe you saw someone else's car. Maybe, she said slowly, but her expression said otherwise. After she left, I pulled up my security camera footage. July 11th, 11:17 p.m. David's Lexus in my driveway. David entering with a key I didn't know he had, staying 11 minutes, leaving. I called him immediately. Why were you in my house last night? His voice came smooth, unbothered. I wasn't. I was with Vanessa all evening. I have you on camera. Pause. Oh, wait. Yeah, I stopped by. You asked me to grab your blood pressure medication. Remember, you called at 10:30. No, I didn't. Dad. His voice shifted to concern. You did. I have the call log. Want me to send you a screenshot? I checked my phone. There was an outgoing call to David at 10:33, but I had no memory of making it. I sat in my living room staring at that call log for an hour. Had I called him and forgotten, was my memory failing? Then I noticed my TV remote on the kitchen table. I never left it there. It lived on the arm of my recliner. I went back to the camera footage and watched it again, this time paying attention to what David did inside. Watched him adjust picture frames a 1/4 inch. Move the remote. Shift the salt shaker from the left side of the stove to the right. Small things. Crazy-making things. I opened a new document on my laptop and titled it, Gaslighting Evidence. My phone rang. David. Hey, Dad, just checking in. Dr. Palmer asked me to keep an eye on you. How's your memory today? Anything else missing or moved? My hand tightened on the phone. I understood now. My son wasn't worried about me. My son was trying to make me look unstable. And suddenly Margaret's clause made perfect sense. David needed me discredited before the inheritance could be challenged. If I testified about his affair, his abandonment of Sarah, he needed people to dismiss me as confused, unreliable, a grieving old man whose mind was slipping. I answered, keeping my voice steady. My memory's perfect, son. Crystal clear. After I hung up, I sat at Margaret's desk and stared at her photograph. She'd known. Somehow she'd known David would do this, would go this far to protect what he thought he deserved. I opened the evidence folder and added a new file. Started documenting every call, every manipulation, every small, cruel thing David was doing to make me doubt my own mind. He thought he was clever. Thought he could gaslight his father into incompetence. He didn't know I was recording everything. 5 days after I started documenting David's gaslighting, my phone reminded me about the follow-up appointment with Dr. Palmer. I arrived alone, ready to play the role of concerned elderly man, while my phone recorded everything from my jacket pocket. David showed up 5 minutes after I checked in, claiming he'd been nearby. We both knew that was a lie. Palmer's office felt colder this time. She pulled out a spiral notebook I'd never seen before. Pages filled with handwriting that looked like mine, but shakier, more erratic. Entries describing confusion, forgotten conversations, items appearing in wrong places. These entries are concerning, she said. That's not my journal. David leaned forward. Dad, we started it together after your last appointment. You've been writing in it every night. I've never seen that notebook. Palmer and David exchanged the look. I'd come to recognize it instantly. Pity mixed with worry, the universal expression of people convinced you're losing your mind. Robert, what year is it? Palmer asked gently. On 2024, July 15th, Thursday. I had oatmeal for breakfast, drove myself here, and my son is lying. David's mask slipped for half a second. Pure frustration flashed across his face before the concerned son expression returned. Have you considered that stress over David and Sarah's divorce might be affecting your perception? Palmer's tone stayed professional. There it was. David had told her about the separation, framed me as taking sides, becoming irrational. My perception is fine. My son, however, is trying to make me look unstable. Dad, why would I do that? Excellent question. I stood. Dr. Palmer, I'd like a second opinion. Can you recommend another psychiatrist? David spoke quickly. I actually already arranged a consultation. Dr. Richard Hayes. He specializes in seniors dealing with grief and major life transitions. How thoughtful. When? Tomorrow, 2 p.m. David's smile didn't reach his eyes. Robert nodded slowly. I'll be there. After the appointment, David insisted on dinner at Harbor View, an upscale place overlooking the water. Vanessa was already waiting at the table when we arrived. She played her role perfectly. Concerned, compassionate, asking gentle questions about my health, while suggesting I might benefit from more support. She mentioned a retirement community her father's company had developed, beautiful place with full medical staff and memory care units. I understood immediately. They weren't just trying to discredit me. They wanted me isolated in a facility where they could control everything, including my inheritance. My phone sat in my jacket pocket, recording every word. David relaxed as dinner progressed, confident I was playing along. He mentioned the Hartley merger, how important family stability was for major business deals, how clear asset management mattered to investors. I asked simple questions, let him talk, gave him rope. That night, I reviewed my security footage. Found exactly what I expected. David had entered my house that afternoon, while I was at Palmer's office, placed the fake journal on my desk, where I'd supposedly been writing in it nightly. I called Crawford immediately. Hayes is Peter Hartley's personal psychiatrist, Crawford said. If he diagnoses you as incompetent, David can file for conservatorship. He'd control both inheritances. I'm going to that appointment, but I'm bringing backup. What kind of backup? The kind that carries weight in court. I hung up and called Linda Foster. Asked if her doorbell camera had caught David's late-night visits. She'd already saved the footage, had been wondering if she should mention it. Save everything, I told her. I'm going to need it soon. That night I sat in Margaret's study, her letter spread on the desk under the lamp. Save our son from himself, she'd written. But saving David now meant destroying his carefully built lies completely, publicly, permanently. He wasn't just greedy anymore. He was dangerous. The next morning, I dressed in my best suit, the one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral. Dark, navy, crisp white shirt, the tie she'd bought me for our 35th anniversary. I looked at myself in the mirror. 62 years old, still sharp, still strong. Not some confused old man whose mind was slipping. I texted Sarah. I need you to do something for me today. I need you as a witness. Her response came within seconds. Where and when? I gave her Hayes's office address and the appointment time. Didn't explain why. Just asked her to trust me. She wrote back. I trust you. I'll be there. I picked up my phone, checked that the recording app was working, made sure the battery was fully charged. Put it in my jacket pocket, where it would catch every word Hayes said. Crawford had prepared me for what to expect. Hayes would be more aggressive than Palmer would push harder for a diagnosis that supported David's narrative. The appointment was a trap designed to manufacture evidence of my incompetence. But David had made one critical mistake. He'd taught me exactly how this game was played. Showed me every manipulation technique, every way to twist words and plant doubt. And now I was going to use those same tactics against him. I drove to Hayes's office with Sarah's text on my phone screen. I'll be there. Margaret's words echoed in my mind. Not the ones from her letter, but something she'd said when we were young and building our business. The best defense is letting them think they're winning right up until the moment you prove they've already lost. Time to prove David had already lost. He just didn't know it yet. The invitation never came, which told me everything I needed to know. David's merger celebration at Hartley Tower was family business, and I'd been written out of the family. I went anyway. July 25th, a Thursday evening, humid enough to make my dress shirt stick to my back during the short walk from the parking garage. Hartley Tower's penthouse event space occupied the top 3 floors, all glass and steel, and views that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Security at the elevator tried to stop me until I mentioned I was David Mitchell's father. They stepped aside. The space was packed with people who mattered. City developers in $1,000 suits, council members whose votes shaped skylines, women in dresses that cost more than my truck. Servers circulated with champagne and appetizers too small to actually fill anyone up. Vanessa saw me first. She wore silver something that caught light and attention in equal measure. Her expression froze for half a second, before smoothing into a hostess smile. She touched David's arm, whispered something, and his head turned. Our eyes met across 50 feet of expensive real estate. Surprise, then annoyance, then the mask sliding back into place. He excused himself from a conversation with 3 men in matching ties and crossed the room. Dad, I didn't know you were coming. Wanted to see what $40 million bought you. His smile went tight. It's an investment. Mom would be proud. Your mother left you that money to build a life with Sarah, not to impress people whose last names are on buildings. His hand found my elbow, grip harder than necessary. Keep your voice down. This isn't the place. He steered me toward a corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread below us, lights coming on as twilight faded. From up here, everything looked small and manageable. Mr. Mitchell. The voice came from behind us, deep and assured. Peter Hartley, even taller, up-close, silver hair, perfect suit that probably cost what I used to make in a month. Peter Hartley, your son is brilliant. We're fortunate to have him. He's fortunate to have his mother's inheritance to invest. Peter's smile never wavered. Generational wealth exists to be leveraged. David understands that. I hope you'll support his vision. The words were pleasant. The meaning underneath wasn't. Dad's been under stress, David said quickly. Mom's passing hit him hard. Of course. Grief is a difficult journey. Peter's hand landed on my shoulder, brief and heavy. If you need anything medical care counseling, we have excellent resources. Family takes care of family. He moved away, rejoining a cluster of important people near the bar. David watched him go, then turned back to me. You need to leave. This is a public event. It's a private business function, and you're embarrassing me. His voice stayed low, but the edge in it was sharp. Go home, Dad. We'll talk later. I left before he could have security escort me out. Took the elevator down 60 floors while champagne-drunk laughter echoed from above. David caught up to me in the parking garage, jogging between concrete pillars in his expensive shoes. Wait, just wait. I stopped at my truck key fob in hand. I need to talk to you about something. He was breathing hard, loosening his tie. Your inheritance. The 40 million. What about it? Have you thought about estate planning investment strategy? He leaned against my truck like we were having a casual father-son chat. That money is sitting in a trust account doing nothing. It could be working for you. It's working fine. What if we pool resources, your 40, my 40? Do something major together. Real legacy building. There it was. The ask I'd been waiting for since Margaret died. Why would I do that? His expression shifted, concern replacing calculation. Because honestly, Dad, I'm worried about your ability to manage that kind of money long term. With your memory issues, the confusion. What if someone takes advantage of you? Someone like you. I'm trying to protect you. The gentleness dropped. Palmer and Hayes both documented cognitive concerns. If something happens, if you become incapacitated, that money needs proper management. Are you threatening me? I'm helping you. Before things get worse. He straightened, brushing garage dust off his sleeve. Think about it. Joint account co-trustees. That way, when you need help, everything's already in place. I opened the truck door. My memory is fine. My judgment is fine. And my money is mine. His mask slipped. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Making what harder? He caught himself, the concern sliding back. Making sure you're cared for. That's all. I drove home through traffic that moved like cold honey, called Crawford from the driveway. He wants my inheritance, the whole plan. Discredit me, prove incompetence, file for conservatorship control, both inheritances. Conservatorship requires proof you can't manage your affairs. If you're clearly competent, they're manufacturing evidence. Palmer Hayes, the fake journal, the emergency medical contact they added without permission. Crawford went quiet. Move your money, tonight. Somewhere David can't track. I hung up and looked at the house. 40 years of mortgage payments and memories. David learned to walk on that porch. Margaret planted roses along the fence every spring. Now he wanted to take it all. My phone buzzed. Sarah. Heard about David's engagement on social media. Are you okay? I'm fine. How are you? Surviving. Marcus says divorce should be final soon. David's lawyer keeps delaying, but we'll get there. I almost told her. Almost said your ex-husband is about to lose $40 million and doesn't know it yet. But Crawford's voice echoed. Let her choose divorce for the right reasons. You're stronger than you know. So are you. After she hung up, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. Transferred $38 million to a new account at a different institution under a trust name David wouldn't recognize. Left $2 million in the original account. Enough to look legitimate, not enough to be worth fighting over. My email pinged. Automated alert from Dr. Palmer's office. David Mitchell had been added as emergency contact on my medical records. I hadn't authorized that. I called Crawford back. They're moving faster than we thought. How long until they file? Days, maybe a week. We need to be ready. I looked at Margaret's photo on my desk. They're coming for everything. Then we hit them first, with everything. I opened the evidence folder. 43 documented incidents. Photos, recordings, medical records showing I'd passed every cognitive test. Financial transfers. Witness statements from Linda Foster. Camera footage of David breaking into my house. Let them come, I whispered. Reputation is a fragile thing. David knew that. Which is why he started destroying mine in public 9 days after his merger celebration. The community center fundraiser had been on Margaret's calendar for 20 years. She'd served on the board, organized silent auctions, baked cookies that sold for double what they were worth. Missing it would have been admitting defeat. I went anyway. August 3rd, a Saturday afternoon that felt too bright for what was coming. The center's main hall was packed with people I'd known for decades. Neighbors, friends, Pastor Williams, who'd married us and buried her. I was setting up Margaret's memorial photo display when David walked in with Vanessa. He didn't come to me, didn't acknowledge the photos I'd arranged. Just started working the room like a politician handshake and concerned expression perfectly calibrated. I heard him before I saw what he was doing. Just want to check on Dad. He's been struggling since Mom passed. Pastor Williams nodded sympathetically. David's voice dropped, but not enough. Memory lapses. The doctors are concerned. I moved closer, pretending to adjust a photo frame. The Hendersons were next. Found him confused in the grocery store parking lot last week. Couldn't remember where he'd parked. Had to help him search for 20 minutes. That never happened. I hadn't been to that grocery store in a month. Margaret's book club friends clustered near the refreshment table. David approached with practiced worry. We're looking into memory care facilities, just to have options. You understand. Mrs. Henderson broke away from the group and found me by the display. Her hand touched my arm, gentle and pitying. Not Robert, honey, if you need anything. Rides to appointments, meals, brought over someone to check in. Please let us know. Understanding hit like cold water. David was preemptively explaining me, building a story where anything I said about him would sound like confusion, paranoia, the sad decline of a grieving man whose mind was slipping. If I accused him of gaslighting, they'd think it was cognitive decline. If I mentioned his affair, they'd assume I'd mixed up facts. If I said he was trying to steal my inheritance, they'd hear paranoid delusions. He was making me unreliable before I could become dangerous. I found him near the buffet table, pulled him aside. What are you doing? His arm went around my shoulders, voice loud enough to carry. Dad, I was just telling everyone how brave you're being. His grip tightened, fingers digging into my shoulder blade. Smile and act normal, or I'll tell them you're having an episode. I smiled. He released me and walked away. 20 minutes later, I overheard Vanessa holding court with women I'd known since David was in elementary school. It's heartbreaking watching David try to care for his father. Robert gets combative when David tries to help. Makes accusations, says David is stealing from him, lying about things. She shook her head, expression perfectly sad. The doctors think it might be paranoia, grief-induced cognitive issues. That's so sad, one woman said. Robert was always so sharp. Was, past tense, like I'd already died. My hands shook. I gripped the edge of a table to steady them. Every word was calculated. They weren't just lying. They were building a medical narrative with vocabulary that sounded professional, authoritative, irreversible. The fundraiser ended at 4. David found me packing up Margaret's photos. We need to talk about next steps. There are no next steps. He sighed, patient and weary. I've scheduled a family meeting. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., my place. Dr. Palmer, Dr. Hayes, and a social worker will be there. We're discussing your care plan. I don't need a care plan. The medical professionals disagree. He pulled a folder from his messenger bag. Reports evaluations. This is serious. I can't watch you decline and do nothing. I took the folder, flipped through pages that made me look unstable, missed appointments I'd never scheduled, erratic behavior I'd never exhibited, financial confusion that didn't exist. This is fiction. It's documentation. His voice dropped private and cold. You can fight this, make it ugly, or you can let people who love you help. Your choice. And if I don't come to your family meeting, his smile didn't reach his eyes. Then we file for emergency conservatorship. A judge reviews these records and decides you're a danger to yourself. Is that what you want? I drove home in silence, hands tight on the wheel. Called Sarah from my driveway because she was the only person who'd understand. They're trying to force me into a conservatorship. What, Robert? Why? Because I know what David did, and I'm in the way. Silence. Then, what did he do? I almost told her. Almost said he's about to lose everything and doesn't know it yet. But if she knew about the money before choosing to fight, it would taint her choice. He's trying to control my inheritance, discredit me, make me look incompetent. Her voice went hard. He's doing to you what he did to me, making you doubt yourself. I'm not doubting myself, but everyone else is. Then we fight back, together. You helped me when I had nothing. Let me help you. How? I'm a witness. I've seen David lie, manipulate, destroy. If they try to paint you as unstable, I'll testify that you're the sanest person I know. My throat went tight. Thank you. The family protects family, and you're more family to me than David ever was. After we hung up, I called Crawford and Marcus on a conference line. They're forcing a meeting tomorrow. Doctor's social worker intervention setup. It's a trap. Crawford's response was immediate. Don't go. If you attend, you legitimize their process. They'll twist everything you say. Marcus agreed. And Robert, it's time. We need to tell Sarah about the clause. I sat at my kitchen table with Margaret's letter in front of me. Tomorrow, David expected me to walk into an ambush, to be declared incompetent, to lose everything. I opened my laptop and typed an email to Crawford. File the trust violation claim, today. Let's end this. My finger hovered over send. The doorbell rang. 10:37 p.m. Security camera showed 2 police cars in my driveway. 4 officers. David standing on my porch, phone in hand, face arranged in grave concern. 1 officer approached my door. Through the camera speaker, I heard, "We got a call about a welfare check. Your son says you've been making threats, acting erratically. We need to talk to you, sir." My blood went cold. David wasn't waiting for tomorrow's meeting. He was having me taken tonight. I steadied my breath and opened the door. Officer Martinez stood closest, hand resting near his belt. Officer Davis hung back by the porch railing. David positioned himself behind them, phone clutched in his hand like evidence. "Mr. Mitchell, your son called. He's worried about your well-being." "I'm fine. My son and I have a disagreement, but I'm not in danger." Davis shifted his weight. "He mentioned you've been acting confused, making threats. Says you're not taking prescribed medications." I was never prescribed any medications, and I haven't threatened anyone." David stepped forward, expression carefully arranged into concern. "Dad, please. Let them help you. You haven't been yourself since Mom died." I looked directly at him. "I know exactly what you're doing." His face shifted into practiced sadness. He turned to the officers. "See the paranoia? He thinks I'm conspiring against him." Martinez addressed me again. "Mr. Mitchell, have you been under psychiatric care recently?" "I've seen 2 psychiatrists at my son's insistence. Both evaluations were manipulated." David produced folded papers from his jacket. "I have signed evaluations from Dr. Palmer and Dr. Hayes recommending inpatient observation. He's a danger to himself. I'm not. I'm competent, lucid, and fully aware that this is a false report. Davis's voice gentled. Sir, we can do this voluntarily, or we can petition for an emergency hold. Your son has medical documentation. I understood immediately. Go quietly or be forced. Either way, I was going. I'll go voluntarily, but I'm calling my attorney. David's voice dripped false relief. Of course. Whatever you need, Dad. As they escorted me to the patrol car, I saw Linda Foster standing on her porch, 3 houses down, phone raised and recording. Her camera followed us down the driveway. Evidence. A witness the system couldn't ignore. David walked back to his silver Lexus, already checking his phone. Mission accomplished. Father neutralized. Riverside Behavioral Health Center loomed against the midnight sky, all institutional brick and narrow windows with bars. Intake took 40 minutes. They processed me like cargo. Personal belongings removed and inventoried. Wallet, phone, keys, belt, shoelaces. Everything that made me autonomous stripped away. An identification bracelet was attached to my wrist. A hospital gown was issued, thin fabric that felt like surrender. The intake nurse led me down fluorescent-lit hallways to a shared room. 2 beds, 1 window with wire mesh embedded in the glass. My roommate was a young man in his 20s, muttering conversations with people who weren't there. This was where they'd put me, with people who actually needed help. The nurse explained the 72-hour hold. I couldn't leave. I couldn't refuse treatment. I couldn't be released without psychiatric clearance. Minimum 3 days. Maximum indefinite if they decided I was a continuing danger. 3 days minimum in a locked facility, because my son had lied to police and bribed doctors. A different nurse entered around 1 a.m. Rachel, according to her badge. Mid-30s with eyes that looked genuinely kind. Lorazepam, for anxiety. I'm not anxious. I'm angry. There's a difference. She hesitated. Your son indicated you've been refusing medication. Because I don't need it. What I need is a lawyer. You can make phone calls in the morning. I was too smart to fight. Refusal would be marked as non-compliance. I took the small white pill, placed it on my tongue, accepted the water. Rachel watched me swallow, nodded, and left. The moment the door closed, I spat the pill into a tissue. 7 a.m. Breakfast was served in a common room with bolted-down furniture. I approached the staff desk and requested phone access. They allowed 1 call. I used it on Marcus Webb. He answered on the 2nd ring. Robert, they had me committed. 72-hour hold. Riverside Behavioral Health Center. Jesus Christ. A pause. Okay. Listen carefully. Don't take any medication they offer. Don't sign anything. We're filing an emergency petition for release this morning. Can you hold on until then? Do I have a choice? No. But Robert, this is assault. This is false imprisonment. When we get you out of there, we'll have everything we need to destroy him. 8 a.m. Dr. Palmer arrived to conduct my evaluation. She sat across from me in a small consultation room, clipboard balanced on her knee, asking standard questions. Orientation to time and place, current mood, suicidal ideation. I answered each one perfectly. Calm, rational, clear. She frowned at her notes. Your son indicated you were in acute distress when the police arrived. My son lied. Why would he lie about something like that? Because I'm a witness to his infidelity and his financial manipulation. He needs me discredited before I can testify against him. Dr. Palmer closed her file with a decisive snap. I'm recommending you remain under observation for the full 72 hours. Well, based on what clinical finding? Based on paranoid ideation regarding family members. I laughed, bitter and cold. So if I accurately describe what David is doing, you call it paranoia. If I stay silent, you'll call it withdrawal or dissociation. There's no scenario where I win. She stood. Rest, Mr. Mitchell. We'll reevaluate you on Wednesday, August 5th, 2 p.m. Marcus Webb arrived with a court order and James Crawford at his side. I watched through the wire mesh window as they met with the facility director. Marcus had brought ammunition. Documents spread across the director's desk like playing cards in a winning hand. Crawford's voice carried through the door, sharp and uncompromising. My client was committed under false pretenses using falsified medical reports. If you don't release him immediately, we'll file suit against this facility, Dr. Palmer, Dr. Hayes, and every staff member involved for false imprisonment and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. 3:17 p.m. I was released. They processed me out with the same bureaucratic efficiency. Personal belongings returned. Identification bracelet removed. Hospital gown exchanged for my own clothes. As I walked toward the exit, Rachel approached me in the hallway. She pressed a folded note into my hand. Dr. Hayes and Dr. Palmer met with your son in the parking lot yesterday afternoon. They were paid. I saw the envelope change hands. Rachel M. Outside in the parking lot, Marcus Webb waited beside his car. Sarah stood next to him. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward and wrapped me in a fierce hug. "They're not getting away with this," she said. Crawford's phone rang. He answered, listened, his face darkening. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "David just filed for emergency conservatorship. The hearing is scheduled for Monday morning, 9 a.m. My jaw tightened. Then we show the judge exactly who David Mitchell really is. Crawford nodded slowly. Time to drop the hammer. Time to reveal Margaret's claws. Sarah looked between us, confusion evident. What claws? What are you talking about? I met her eyes. We need to talk. There's something your mother-in-law left for you. Some truths are too heavy to carry alone. 4 hours after leaving Riverside Behavioral, I sat in Marcus Webb's office with Sarah across from me. Evening light slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk. Sarah had changed into jeans, and a sweater still looked exhausted from the emotional whiplash of the past week. She'd agreed to this meeting without understanding why Robert's trust attorney needed to be present for her divorce proceedings. James Crawford sat beside Marcus, a locked file box positioned between them, like a secret waiting to detonate. "Sarah, what I'm about to tell you will change everything." Crawford's voice was grave, measured. "But I need you to understand, Margaret planned this. She wanted to protect you." Sarah's face clouded with confusion. "Protect me from what?" I reached across and took her hand. "From David." Crawford unlocked the file box with a small brass key. Inside were 2 documents I'd memorized by now, Margaret's will and the sealed letter that had started everything. Margaret's estate was $80 million. $40 million to Robert, $40 million to David. But David's inheritance came with a condition. He slid the clause document across the desk. Sarah picked it up with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the legal language. I watched her lips move as she read the crucial section aloud, barely above a whisper. "If David Mitchell engages in marital infidelity or abandons his wife Sarah without just cause within 5 years of the inheritance date, his entire share, $40 million, shall be immediately and irrevocably transferred to Sarah Bennett Mitchell." She read it twice, then looked up, eyes wide and disbelieving. "I don't understand. What does this mean?" Marcus leaned forward, voice gentle but clear. "It means the moment David kicked you out and moved Vanessa in, he violated the terms of his inheritance. He lost everything. His entire $40 million, Crawford added. Gone. Transferred to you. That's what Margaret wanted." Sarah's gaze swung to me, and I saw betrayal flicker across her face before understanding replaced it. "You knew this whole time. Margaret told me in a sealed letter the day of the will reading. She made me promise to watch him, to document everything, but not to interfere with your choices." I squeezed her hand. "She wanted you to fight for yourself because you deserved better, not because $40 million was waiting at the end." "And David." Her voice went hollow. Does he know? David knows there was a clause, Crawford said. Margaret told him a sealed provision existed regarding his conduct during the marriage, but she never revealed the specifics. He didn't know that infidelity would cost him everything. Which is why he's been trying so hard to discredit Robert, Marcus added. Your father-in-law is the primary witness who can prove David violated the clause. If Robert looks incompetent, his testimony becomes worthless. Sarah stood abruptly pacing to the window. Her reflection in the darkening glass looked small and lost. $40 million. It's yours, Crawford said quietly. Margaret wanted you to have it. She believed you earned it by loving her son when he stopped deserving it. Sarah turned back to face us, and I saw something warring in her expression. Hope battling against old pain. I don't want his money because of a technicality. It's not a technicality. My voice came out harder than I intended. It's consequences. Margaret gave David 5 years to prove his character. He failed in 2 months. But what if he says he wants to fix things? What if he comes back? Marcus stood, moved closer to her. Would you take him back? The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah looked down at her hands, at the gold wedding band still circling her finger. Slowly, deliberately, she twisted it off. No. The word came out stronger. No, I wouldn't. He threw me away like garbage, insulted me, humiliated me, chose Vanessa and the Hartleys over everything we built together. She walked back to the desk and set the ring down with a quiet click that sounded final. I'm filing the trust claim. Crawford's expression remained neutral, but I saw approval in his eyes. Once we file, this becomes public record. David will know. The Hartleys will know. It will be ugly. Let it be ugly. Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her jaw was set with determination I recognized from Margaret. Margaret believed I was worth $40 million. Maybe it's time I believed it too. I pulled her into a hug. She held on tight, shaking with emotion she'd been holding back for months. She'd be so proud of you, I whispered. The next morning, we reconvened at Crawford's office for final preparation. Coffee and legal pads covered every surface, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Crawford spread documents across the conference table like a general planning battle strategy. Some Monday 9 a.m. 2 cases heard simultaneously, David's conservatorship petition and Sarah's trust violation claim. Judge Patricia Reynolds presiding. Marcus picked up the thread. David will argue Robert is incompetent, his testimony unreliable. He'll present the fake journal, the psychiatric evaluations, the manufactured evidence of cognitive decline. We'll counter with Sarah's testimony, Crawford said. Linda Foster's documentation of David's break-ins, Rachel Martinez's affidavit about witnessing the bribery, Robert's security footage showing everything. And if the judge doesn't believe us, I had to ask. Crawford smiled, small and knowing. He reached into his briefcase and produced a USB drive, holding it up like a talisman. And then we play Margaret's final card. Sarah leaned forward. What's on it? Margaret recorded a video message 3 weeks before she died, sealed with her will with explicit instructions that it only be played if the clause was triggered, and David contested it in court. The room went silent. What does she say? Sarah's voice was barely audible, so Margaret explaining why she created the clause, in her own words, from beyond the grave. Marcus exhaled slowly. That's our nuclear option, Crawford nodded. We save it for closing arguments. Let David think he's winning. Then we play this, and Margaret Mitchell gets the last word. I returned home to silence and shadows. Checked my phone and found a voicemail from David left an hour earlier. His voice was tight, controlled anger, barely masked by false calm. Dad, I know what you're planning. I know about the clause. Drop it, convince Sarah to back off, and maybe I'll drop the conservatorship. You have until midnight to decide. I deleted the voicemail without hesitation, then texted Sarah, he knows. He's scared. We have him. Her response came immediately. Good. Let him be scared for once. I looked at Margaret's photo on my desk one last time before bed. Tomorrow we finish this, together. The courthouse smelled like floor polish and fear. County Courthouse, August 10th, 9 a.m. Security checkpoint, metal detectors, lawyers in expensive suits carrying briefcases heavy with evidence and ambition. Judge Patricia Reynolds' courtroom occupied the third-floor wood paneling and high ceilings, designed to make people feel small. The gallery filled quickly. Vanessa and Peter Hartley sat in the back row. Linda Foster 3 rows up, her phone recording discreetly. Sarah beside Marcus at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, wedding ring conspicuously absent. David sat at the defendant's table with Thomas Brennan Hartley, firm's senior partner. Expensive suit, silver cufflinks, the kind of lawyer who charged by the minute and won by intimidation. 9:03, Judge Reynolds entered and we stood. Be seated. She arranged files on her bench, reading glasses perched on her nose. We have 2 related matters. Mitchell versus Mitchell conservatorship petition and Mitchell trust violation claim. Given the substantial overlap, we'll hear them together. Mr. Brennan, you filed first. Brennan stood buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. Your Honor, this is straightforward elder protection. Robert Mitchell, 62, is suffering cognitive decline following his wife's death. Medical professionals have documented memory loss, paranoid ideation, inability to manage daily affairs. His son seeks limited conservatorship to ensure his father's safety and financial security. He placed David's fabricated folder on the evidence table like it was gospel. Judge Reynolds turned. And the opposing matter, Crawford rose. Your Honor, the trust violation claim is separate but connected. Sarah Mitchell alleges David Mitchell violated his inheritance terms by committing adultery and abandoning her, both documented within the prohibited 5-year window. As executor, I'm petitioning to enforce the clause and transfer David's inheritance to Mrs. Mitchell, per the decedent's explicit instructions. David's face drained of color. He leaned toward Brennan, whispering urgently. Judge Reynolds studied both files. This is unusual. Mr. Brennan, did your client know about this clause when filing for conservatorship? Brennan's smile stayed smooth. We learned of it recently, Your Honor, which frankly supports our position. Mr. Robert Mitchell appears to have influenced Mrs. Mitchell to file a frivolous claim retaliating against his son's necessary medical intervention. Crawford's voice went sharp. That's absurd. Margaret Mitchell wrote the clause before her death and sealed it until triggered. We'll hear evidence. Judge Reynolds looked at Brennan. Call your first witness. The petitioner calls Dr. Jennifer Palmer. Palmer took the stand, sworn in, settled into the witness chair with professional composure. Brennan walked her through Robert's supposed decline. Missed appointments, confusion, the journal I'd allegedly written, her recommendation for inpatient observation. In your professional opinion, is Robert Mitchell capable of managing his financial affairs? Based on his presentations, I had concerns about. Marcus stood. Objection. Dr. Palmer evaluated Mr. Mitchell exactly twice, both at David Mitchell's arrangement. We have evidence those evaluations were compromised. Judge Reynolds didn't look up from her notes. Overruled for now. Dr. Palmer, continue. I recommended inpatient observation. Mr. Mitchell resisted. Marcus rose for cross-examination, and the temperature in the room shifted. Dr. Palmer, did David Mitchell provide you with a pre-written journal attributed to Robert Mitchell? She hesitated. He brought documentation, yes. Did you verify the handwriting? Compare it to known samples? No. Did you know David Mitchell had financial motive to discredit his father? I don't see how. Marcus pulled Rachel's affidavit from his folder. Your Honor, we have a sworn statement from Riverside facility nurse Rachel Martinez. She witnessed Dr. Palmer and Dr. Hayes accepting cash payments from David Mitchell in the parking lot prior to filing psychiatric hold orders. The courtroom stirred. Vanessa shifted in her seat. Peter Hartley leaned toward his own attorney, whispering. Brennan shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is hearsay. and defamation. We have the nurse present to testify, Crawford interjected. Judge Reynolds removed her glasses. I'll allow it. Dr. Palmer, did David Mitchell pay you beyond standard consultation fees? Palmer's face flushed red. He provided a retainer for ongoing family consultations. How much? Silence. Dr. Palmer, how much? $10,000. Barely audible. The judge's expression hardened. Step down. Crawford stood. The trust executor calls Robert Mitchell. I took the stand, hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Met David's eyes across the courtroom. Saw him seeing me clearly for maybe the first time in months. Crawford's questions were gentle, building a picture. My relationship with David before Margaret died. The pride I'd felt watching him grow. The closeness we'd shared. My voice stayed steady, clear, demonstrating the cognitive function Brennan claimed I'd lost. Then Crawford shifted. When did things change? When David started his affair with Vanessa Hartley. When he decided I was in his way. When he manufactured a mental health crisis to discredit me. I described it all. The gaslighting. Keys moved. Glasses in the refrigerator. Late-night break-ins caught on camera. Brennan took over for cross-examination, aggressive from the first question. Mr. Mitchell, you've been obsessively surveilling your son since his separation from Sarah, haven't you? I've been documenting his behavior, yes. Because you disapproved of his personal choices. Because my late wife asked me to witness his actions. Because those actions were cruel and illegal. Illegal! Brennan's tone dripped skepticism. He's breaking into my home. Falsifying medical records, bribing doctors, attempting to steal my inheritance. Brennan smirked. That's quite a conspiracy theory. I pulled my phone from my pocket, handed it to the bailiff. 47 hours of security footage, time-stamped, backed up to cloud storage, every break-in, every item moved, every manipulation documented. Brennan's smirk died. Judge Reynolds called lunch recess. The courtroom emptied slowly, spectators buzzing. David caught me in the hallway, Brennan trailing behind, looking nervous. Dad, we can still fix this. Drop the clause claim, I'll drop the conservatorship. We both walk away. I looked at him, really looked. You broke your mother's heart, destroyed a woman who loved you, tried to steal my mind and my money. There's nothing left to fix. His mask dropped. You're going to regret this. Sarah appeared, stepped between us. No, David. You're going to regret this. 2 p.m. court reconvened. Crawford stood. Your Honor, we'd like to call Sarah Mitchell to the stand. And we have one additional piece of evidence. A video recorded by Margaret Mitchell, before her death specifically for this proceeding. David's face drained of color. Judge Reynolds looked at Crawford, then at David, then back. Proceed. The courtroom screen flickered to life, and Margaret's face filled the wall. Crawford stood beside the monitor, remote in hand. Your Honor, Margaret Mitchell recorded this statement on May 15, 2024, 1 month before her death. She instructed me to play it only if the infidelity clause was triggered. Judge Reynolds leaned forward. Proceed. David's face went white. Vanessa shifted in her seat, whispering to her father. Before I reveal what Margaret said in that video, I need to know you're still here with me. Comment a number from 1 to 10. How angry are you at David right now? Let me see those numbers flood in. And just a quick reminder, the story ahead includes some fictionalized elements for dramatic and educational purposes. If that's not your thing, feel free to pause here and explore other content. But if you're ready for the moment of clarity, let's continue. Crawford pressed play. Margaret sat in her study, framed by shelves of leather-bound books. The date stamp in the corner read, May 15th, 2024, 3:47 p.m. Her voice filled the silent courtroom. If you're watching this, David has done exactly what I feared. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Robert gripped the armrest. I'm recording this a month before I die. Margaret continued, her tone steady but heavy. The doctors say I have weeks left. I've spent them thinking about my son and the choices he might make. She paused, her eyes, once warm, now filled with sorrow, staring directly into the camera. David, I gave you everything. A home, an education, opportunities your father and I worked decades to provide. I hoped it would teach you integrity, loyalty, and gratitude. Her voice hardened. But I've seen the way you look at wealth, the way you dismiss Sarah when she talks about the future, the way you mention moving up, as if the people who love you are obstacles. David slumped forward, elbows on the table, face buried in his hands. Brennan touched his shoulder. David shook him off. Margaret's gaze didn't waver. I know you're planning something, David. I've watched you pull away from Sarah. I've heard the calls you take in another room. I've seen the way you calculate instead of care. Vanessa stood abruptly and walked out. The door slammed. Peter Hartley remained jaw tight, staring at the screen. So I'm protecting the person you're going to hurt, Margaret said, her voice softening slightly. Sarah is kind. She's loyal. She gave you 7 years of love, and you're going to throw it away for money and status. She leaned closer to the camera. If you've abandoned her, you've lost $40 million. This isn't punishment, David. It's consequence. You chose ambition over family. You chose greed over love. Now you live with that choice. Margaret's shoulders sagged, and for a moment she looked like the mother Robert remembered. Tired, heartbroken, but resolute. Sarah, if you're hearing this, I'm so sorry. You deserved better than my son. Use the money wisely. Build something good. Help people who need it. Don't let David's betrayal define who you become. She turned her gaze back to the camera, and her voice broke. David, I love you. I always will. But I won't let you destroy someone else to prove how much you think you deserve. Someday, I hope you understand why I did this. I hope you find your way back to the man I raised you to be. Margaret reached forward. The screen went black. The courtroom sat in absolute silence. Sarah wept quietly, shoulders shaking. Marcus handed her a tissue. Robert stared at his son, who hadn't moved, face still hidden in his hands. Judge Reynolds removed her glasses and set them on the bench. She looked at David for a long moment, then turned to Crawford. Mr. Crawford, the court accepts this recording as evidence of the testator's intent. Mr. Brennan, do you have any objections to its admissibility? Brennan rose slowly. No, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Mrs. Mitchell, please approach the stand. Sarah stood, wiping her eyes, and walked to the witness box. She placed her hand on the Bible. I swear to tell the whole story. Mrs. Mitchell, Crawford began, his voice gentle. How long were you married to David? 7 years. We met in college. He proposed at the beach where we had our first date. Shall I describe your marriage before Margaret's death? Sarah's voice steadied. We were happy. David worked long hours, but he always came home. We talked about adopting. He wanted 2 kids and a dog. When did things change? After Margaret died, June 2023. The will reading was a year later, June 10th. David inherited $40 million. Crawford paused. What happened after the inheritance? Sarah's jaw tightened. 2 days later, he told me he was leaving. He said he'd met someone who understood his ambitions. He gave me until the end of the month to move out of our home. Who was this person? Vanessa Hartley. Crawford glanced at the gallery. Peter Hartley stared straight ahead, expressionless. Did David explain why he was ending the marriage? He called me a burden. He said the money let him finally live the life he deserved, and I wasn't part of that life. Were you aware of Margaret's clause before last week? No, I had no idea. Margaret never mentioned it. How do you feel about the inheritance now? Sarah's eyes filled again. grateful, heartbroken. Margaret saw something I didn't. She protected me when I couldn't protect myself. Crawford nodded. Thank you. No further questions. Brennan stood, straightening his tie. Mrs. Mitchell, you stand to gain $40 million if this court rules in your favor. Correct? Would I stand to receive what Margaret wanted me to have? But you filed for divorce on June 18th. Doesn't that mean you ended the marriage? Marcus shot to his feet. Objection. Misleading. The record clearly shows. Judge Reynolds raised a hand. Sustained. Rephrase, Mr. Brennan. Brennan turned back to Sarah. Could you have reconciled with David? No. He made it clear I was replaceable. Brennan studied her for a moment, then nodded. Nothing further. Sarah stepped down and returned to her seat. Robert reached over and squeezed her hand. Judge Reynolds straightened the papers before her. I've reviewed the evidence presented today. The petition for conservatorship over Robert Mitchell is denied. Mr. Mitchell has demonstrated full cognitive capacity and sound judgment. She turned to David. Regarding the trust violation, the clause in Margaret Mitchell's will is clear, legally enforceable, and unambiguously triggered by your actions. The $40 million held in trust for you is hereby transferred in its entirety to Sarah Bennett Mitchell, effective immediately. David's lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. David waved him off without looking up. Judge Reynolds' voice hardened. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office. The evidence suggests fraud, attempted elder abuse conspiracy to commit financial exploitation and falsification of medical records. Bailiff, please ensure Mr. David Mitchell remains available for questioning by law enforcement. The bailiff stepped forward. David didn't move. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel fell. Victory doesn't always feel the way you think it will. The courthouse doors swung open, and evening light hit us like a wave. Sarah walked beside me, Marcus and Crawford flanking us on either side. Camera flashes exploded from the steps below. A dozen reporters surged forward, microphones thrust into the air. Mr. Mitchell, how do you feel about your son's actions? Mrs. Mitchell, what will you do with $40 million? Is it true? Margaret Mitchell recorded a deathbed confession. Sarah stopped halfway down the steps. Her voice was steady, clear. Margaret Mitchell was one of the kindest women I've ever known. This inheritance is her final gift, and I'll use it to honor her memory. I added, my son made his choices. Now he lives with them. We continued down. Marcus's black sedan waited at the curb. I glanced back at the courthouse entrance. David stood alone at the top of the steps, phone pressed to his ear. Brennan was 20 feet away, briefcase in hand, walking toward a waiting town car without a backward glance. David lowered the phone. Even from this distance, I could see his hand shaking. Sarah saw him too. For just a moment, her expression softened. Not pity, not forgiveness, something closer to sadness. Then she turned away. Let's go home, she said quietly. We climbed into the car. As Marcus pulled into traffic, I watched David through the rear window until the courthouse disappeared behind the downtown skyline. $40 million. Gone. Just like that. An hour later, David stood in the Hartley Tower penthouse, the same condo where he'd celebrated the merger 2 weeks ago. The space echoed. Vanessa's closet was empty hangers swaying on the rod. Her bathroom counter, once crowded with expensive skincare bottles, was bare. A single key sat on the kitchen island. He called her. Voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. David scrolled to Peter Hartley's number and pressed dial. Peter answered on the third ring. David, I was going to call you. Peter, I need to talk about the Hartley-Mitchell partnership. I know today was a disaster, but we can rebuild. There is no partnership, David. Peter's tone was cold, businesslike. Our attorneys are drawing up dissolution papers. The merger is canceled. Your architectural contracts are void. You can't do that. We have a signed agreement, which includes a morals clause. You attempted to defraud your father and bribed medical professionals. That's a material breach. We're done. Peter, please. I made mistakes, but you're not the man we thought you were. And frankly, you're a liability we can't afford. A pause. The penthouse lease is in my name. I'll need you out by Friday. The line went dead. David walked through the condo, footsteps loud on the hardwood. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the harbor lights twinkling across the water. The view had cost him everything, and now it meant nothing. His phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. We had fun, but I'm not interested in broke men. Good luck. David slid down the wall and sat on the floor, knees drawn up, surrounded by furniture that wasn't his, in a life that had just evaporated. The next morning, Detective Paul Morrison knocked on my door at 10 sharp. He wore a gray suit and carried a leather portfolio. Mr. Mitchell, I'm investigating the allegations Judge Reynolds referred to our office. Elder abuse conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery of medical professionals. I handed him a flash drive. Everything you need is on here. Security footage, financial records, witness statements, recordings of David's coercion attempts. Morrison turned the drive over in his hand. Dr. Palmer and Dr. Hayes. Rachel Martinez, the nurse at Riverside Psychiatric, witnessed the cash payments. She's willing to testify. He nodded slowly. We'll be filing charges. This is serious. Elder abuse, carries up to 5 years. Conspiracy adds more. And bribing medical professionals to falsify psychiatric holds. He whistled. Your son is in a lot of trouble. I don't want to destroy him, I said. I want him to understand what he did. Morrison's expression didn't change. That's not your choice anymore, sir. This is a criminal matter now. He left 20 minutes later with the flash drive and a signed affidavit. I stood at the window and watched his unmarked sedan pull away. Margaret's photo sat on the bookshelf behind me. I could almost hear her voice. Everyone gets what they deserve. The arrest happened on August 12th at 3 in the afternoon. David had checked into a budget motel off Route 9, the kind with peeling paint and hourly rates. Detective Morrison called me an hour later. He's in custody. Arraignment tomorrow morning. Bail set at $250,000. I thought about the $40 million David had lost, about the $250,000 he couldn't pay because the Hartley family had frozen his partnership accounts and canceled his credit lines. Thank you, Detective. We'll be in touch if we need further testimony. I hung up and sat in the kitchen for a long time staring at my phone. That evening, I drove to Sarah's new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood near the elementary school where she used to teach. She answered the door in jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back, looking more like herself than she had in months. David was arrested, I told her. Sarah was quiet for a long time. She poured 2 glasses of iced tea and handed me one. I don't feel happy about it, but I don't feel sorry for him either. That's growth. She gestured to the dining table where papers were spread out in neat stacks. I'm starting a foundation. Margaret's Legacy Fund. Scholarships for teachers, grants for women leaving abusive marriages, support for families dealing with medical debt. Her eyes shone. Margaret gave me $40 million. I'm going to make it matter. I hugged her. She'd be so proud. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dad, I'm sorry. I know you won't believe me, but I'm sorry. David. I stared at the message for a long time. 7 words. 2 months too late. Then I deleted it without responding. Justice is a slow grinding wheel and it turns without mercy. September 22nd arrived cold and gray. I sat in the same courtroom where Margaret's video had played 6 weeks earlier, but this time the gallery was nearly empty. No reporters. No Hartley family. Just me, Sarah, and a handful of strangers fulfilling their civic curiosity. David stood before Judge Reynolds in an orange jumpsuit, hands shackled at his waist. 2 months in county jail had stripped away the polish. His face was thinner, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. No designer suit, no confident smile. Just a man waiting for judgment. The prosecutor, a severe woman in her 50s, stood and read the charges. Elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery of medical professionals, attempted theft by deception. The state recommends 12 months incarceration, suspended to 3 months served, plus 5 years supervised probation, a $500,000 fine, mandatory psychological counseling, and a permanent restraining order prohibiting contact with Robert Mitchell, except with written consent. David's public defender, a young man who looked barely out of law school, rose to argue for leniency. Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal record. This is a first offense. The family tragedy surrounding his mother's death created extraordinary emotional stress. We ask the court to consider these mitigating factors. Judge Reynolds listened without expression. Then she turned to David. Mr. Mitchell, I watched your mother's video in this courtroom. I saw a woman dying of cancer who still had the clarity and love to try to save your soul. Instead of honoring that gift, you chose greed, cruelty, and fraud. David's head remained bowed. You manipulated medical professionals. You psychologically tormented your elderly father. You abandoned a loyal wife for status and money, and when confronted with the consequences of your actions, you escalated rather than showed remorse. The judge paused, and the courtroom was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. However, I also believe in the possibility of redemption. Your mother believed in it, which is why she gave you 5 years to prove your character. You failed that test in 2 months, but I'm going to give you another chance. She delivered the sentence clearly, each word a nail. 9 months in county jail, suspended to 3 months, served with credit for time already served and consideration for good behavior. 5 years supervised probation. $500,000 fine payable in installments over 10 years. 200 hours of community service. Mandatory counseling for narcissistic personality disorder. 5-year restraining order from Robert Mitchell, modifiable only with his written consent. David's voice came out hoarse. Your Honor, may I speak? Judge Reynolds nodded. I want to apologize to my father and to Sarah. I became someone I don't recognize. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want them to know I'm sorry. I sat in the 3rd row. Sarah was beside me. Neither of us responded. Judge Reynolds looked at David for a long moment. Apologies are words, Mr. Mitchell. Let's see if your actions ever match them. The gavel fell. 2 deputies stepped forward and led David away. He glanced back once, not at me, at Sarah, and then he was gone. 3 months passed, like water through open hands. By late December, Sarah's foundation occupied a renovated brownstone in the historic district. The walls were covered with photographs, teachers receiving grants, families standing in front of new homes, women cutting ribbons at small business openings. A brass plaque beside the entrance read, Margaret Ann Mitchell Legacy Fund, founded 2025. Sarah was presenting her first quarterly report to the board. I sat at the long table with Linda Foster, Marcus Webb, and 3 women Sarah had helped relocate from abusive situations. We distributed $2.1 million in the first 3 months, Sarah said, clicking through slides on a laptop. 58 teacher scholarships funded. 9 survivors of domestic violence received relocation assistance and financial support. 21 families received full medical debt relief. Linda Foster smiled. Margaret would be so proud. After the meeting, Sarah walked me through the building. She dedicated a small room to Margaret's memory photos, spanning 7 decades, shelves of her favorite books. Her wedding dress preserved in a glass case. I think about her every day, Sarah said quietly. I used to think David's betrayal was the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I realize it was Margaret's last gift. It forced me to discover who I could be without him. I studied the wedding photo, Margaret young and radiant holding my hand. You've done more with that money in 3 months than David would have done in 50 years. Sarah touched the glass case. That's the difference between earning something and inheriting it. David walked out of county jail on December 22nd, carrying a paper bag. Inside his wallet, his phone with a dead battery, his watch. No one was waiting for him. He took a city bus to a halfway house on the east side part of his probation terms. Shared room, 10 p.m. curfew, mandatory job search. His first week he found work washing dishes at an all-night diner. $8 an hour. His hands blistered by the third shift. He scrubbed grease off plates until 2 in the morning, then rode the bus back to the halfway house and stared at the water-stained ceiling. He thought about the penthouse view, Vanessa's laugh, his mother's face on that courtroom screen. He'd lost $40 million, his architectural career, his marriage, his father's respect. The restraining order meant he couldn't call me. His shame meant he couldn't reach out to Sarah. Instead, he went to court-mandated counseling every Thursday at 6. 3 days after Christmas, his therapist asked, "What do you want most right now?" David sat silent for a long time. Then, "I want to tell my father I understand. That he was right. That Mom was right. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want him to know I finally see what I did. Can you tell him he has a restraining order against me? Restraining orders can be modified if both parties agree." David shook his head. "He'd have to consent." "Why would he?" The therapist didn't answer. 2 weeks later, my attorney forwarded a letter. It was from David's counselor requesting a meeting to discuss the potential for restorative dialogue. I stared at that letter for 3 days before I showed it to Sarah. What do you think?" I asked. She considered carefully. "I think that's your decision, Robert. But you don't owe him anything." "I know." I folded the letter. "But maybe I owe Margaret one last attempt." I wrote back that evening. One meeting, March 20th, 2025. 9 months after you destroyed Sarah. If you've truly changed, prove it. Closure isn't an event, it's a process. March 20th arrived with early spring chill. I sat in a corner booth at Miller's Coffee waiting. David walked in at 2 o'clock exactly. He wore work clothes, faded jeans, a gray t-shirt with a construction company logo, scuffed sneakers. His beard had grown out, flecked with gray. He looked nothing like the man who'd worn Rolex watches and Italian suits. I gestured to the empty chair. He sat slowly, like he expected me to change my mind. "Thank you for meeting me," David finally said. I nodded once. "You have 15 minutes. Say what you need to say." He took a breath. "I've spent the last 9 months trying to understand how I became the person who did what I did. Therapy twice a week. 12-step meetings for narcissism. Reading everything I could find about entitlement and character." He pulled a worn notebook from his pocket. "My counselor had me write down every person I hurt. The list is 23 pages long." I didn't respond. "No, I can explain what happened, the pressure, how the money made me feel invincible, how I convinced myself I deserved more. But explanations aren't excuses. I chose cruelty. I chose status over love. I chose to betray everyone who ever cared about me." "Why my first word?" David's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "Because I thought I deserved more. I looked at Mom's inheritance and saw a ticket to a different life. Sarah, I convinced myself her kindness was weakness, that her loyalty was boring." His voice cracked. "I was so wrong. What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't expect a relationship. I just needed you to know that I finally see it. Mom tried to save me with that clause, and I spit in her face. You tried to protect Sarah, and I tried to destroy you." Tears ran down his face unchecked. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm just asking you to know that I finally understand what I lost. I studied the broken man across from me. I believe you understand. I don't know if you've truly changed. 9 months isn't long enough to tell. But I believe you're trying. David exhaled shakily. I'm not lifting the restraining order. I'm not inviting you back into my life. You broke something that can't be fixed with apologies. I know, but I don't hate you. And I think your mother would want me to tell you this. You still have time to become someone she'd be proud of. Not for us. For you. An hour later, I sat beside Margaret's headstone. I met with David today, I told her. He's broken. Really broken. And maybe that's what needed to happen for him to start healing. The wind moved through the oak trees. I didn't forgive him. I don't know if I can. But I didn't curse him either. 5 days later, Sarah's foundation hosted a 9-month celebration. 75 families changed. Sarah stood at a podium. 9 months ago, I thought my life was over. Then I learned that Margaret Mitchell had given me something more valuable than money. She gave me a chance to rewrite my story. The room erupted in applause. Afterward, Sarah and I stood in the empty hall. I saw David, I said, last week. Her face went carefully neutral. How is he? Broken, maybe healing, I don't know yet. Do you think he's really changed? I shrugged. I think he's trying. Whether he succeeds, that's his journey now. Not ours, Sarah nodded slowly. Margaret would say that's grace. Margaret would say that's boundaries. We laughed the first real laugh in 9 months. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from David. Thank you for meeting me. I'm trying to be better. Not for the money. For Mom. I read it twice. I didn't delete it. But I didn't respond either. Instead, I began to type a new message. Dear David, your mother believed in redemption, and so do I. But redemption is earned, not given. I'm not restoring our relationship. I'm not changing my will, but I am removing the restraining order. If 5 years from now you've truly rebuilt your character, we can talk again. Until then, live a life your mother would recognize. Dad. I hit send. Margaret's photo watched from the desk. I whispered, I hope that was right. I thought I heard her voice soft as memory. You kept your promise. That's all I ever asked. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you set in motion. November 2025 arrived with the first frost and bare branches. The convention center was packed, 200 people filling every seat for Sarah's Foundation Symposium on financial abuse and rebuilding after betrayal. I sat in the front row, watching the woman who used to apologize for taking up space now command a room with confidence and grace. Sarah stood at the podium in a navy dress, hands steady. 17 months ago, I was kicked out of my home by someone I loved. I was told I wasn't good enough, wasn't thin enough, wasn't ambitious enough. She paused. I believed it. The room was silent. Then I learned something that changed everything. Someone I admired had seen my worth when I couldn't. She left me resources not just to survive, but to thrive. And she taught me that character, not status, not wealth, not appearance, is the real measure of a person's value. Applause rippled through the audience. The Mitchell Legacy Foundation has now helped 218 families. We've funded 63 teachers' graduate degrees. We've relocated 29 survivors of domestic abuse. We've cleared $1.6 million in medical debt. The room erupted in a standing ovation. Afterward, I hugged her tight. Margaret is somewhere smiling so big right now. Sarah's eyes glistened. I hope so. Because I finally understand what she was trying to tell me. I was never David's sidekick. I was always the main character of my own story. That afternoon, I stopped for coffee at a small cafe. David was there. He sat in the corner booth, wearing a faded Habitat for Humanity t-shirt blueprints spread across the table. His beard had grown in full, and he looked older, rougher around the edges, but somehow more real. Our eyes met. He stood slowly. "Dad." I nodded. "David, I saw the Foundation's website," David said quietly. "Sarah's keynote today. I'm glad she's doing well." "She's doing better than well. She's extraordinary. She always was." His voice cracked. "I was just too selfish to see it." I gestured to the blueprints. "What are you working on?" "Affordable housing project over on Maple Street. I'm on the construction crew, but they let me help with the design work sometimes." He searched for words. "It's the most honest work I've ever done." I studied my son. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. What remained was humility and regret. "How's the counseling?" "It's hard." "Good. I've learned a lot about why I did what I did." "I got your letter. The one about earning redemption. And I'm trying. I don't expect you to believe me. I don't expect anything from you. But I'm trying." I nodded slowly. "That's all anyone can do." We stood there, two men who used to be close now, separated by choices that couldn't be undone. No hug. No dramatic reconciliation. Finally, David spoke. "Tell Sarah I'm sorry. I know it doesn't matter now, but it's true. I'll tell her." He returned to his table. I left with my coffee. Outside, I breathed deep. The cold November air filled my lungs. I didn't feel angry. Didn't feel sad. Didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. An hour later, I drove to Margaret's grave. The headstone had weathered 29 months of seasons, rain and snow and summer heat. Fresh chrysanthemums sat at the base, deep burgundy and gold. Sarah had been here recently. I sat in the grass the way I'd sat 100 times since Margaret died. I kept my promise, I said to the carved granite. I protected Sarah. I documented everything. I let David face his consequences, and I didn't let hate consume me. I traced her name with my finger. David's trying to change. I don't know if it'll stick, but I gave him the truth and I gave him boundaries and I let him walk his own path. Just like you asked. The wind moved through the bare cemetery trees. Now Sarah's thriving. Your money is changing lives every single day. You saved her soul. My voice caught. You were right about everything. Money does reveal character, and losing it might be the only thing that could have saved David. I walked back to my truck and didn't look back. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Dinner tomorrow. Want to tell you about the new program scholarships for kids of single parents." I think Margaret would have loved it. I smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." Inside my home, Margaret's photo still watched from my desk. But next to it now sat a new frame Sarah at the Foundation's ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by families radiant and free. The story was over. The living continued. And character, as always, remained the only wealth that truly mattered. If you've stayed with me through this whole journey, let me leave you with something important. God doesn't measure us by the size of our bank accounts. He measures us by the size of our character. I learned that watching my son lose $40 million and finally discover what truly mattered. This family story taught me that sometimes the people we love most need to fall before they can learn to stand. Margaret knew that. She built consequences into her will not to punish David, but to save him. That's what real love looks like, boundaries that protect, not enable. People call what I did dad revenge, but it wasn't about destroying my son. It was about honoring my wife's wisdom and protecting an innocent woman. When your family story involves watching someone you raised hurt someone you care about, you have a choice: look away or stand up. I chose to stand. Real dad revenge isn't loud or violent. Sometimes it's quiet evidence and patient justice. My dad revenge became the catalyst that saved both Sarah and ultimately David himself. Don't be like I was in the beginning, silent, hopeful, waiting for change that never comes. When you see cruelty, document it. When you see manipulation, name it. This family story proves that justice and love can coexist. And to those who've been betrayed, like Sarah, your darkest moment might be God's invitation to discover who you were always meant to be. If this moved you, please share it. Leave a comment about your own experiences and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. A friendly reminder: upcoming stories may include fictionalized elements designed for educational purposes. If that's not your preference, feel free to explore other content that suits you better. Character, my friends, is the only inheritance that lasts forever.